So yesterday they announced Donald Glover would be playing Lando Calrissian in the Han Solo film. And I thought I would have been more excited about this. I mean, I like the actor from the show Community. I hear he can act even better in dramatic roles, and so that's awesome. The idea of more Han Solo, in theory, is awesome. Sounds like a dream come true, but now that we're getting it, I'm kind of going, not so cool. And in general, what they're doing with these standalone movies hasn't been very interesting to me. The decisions they've decided to make aren't enticing me, and they should. I should be so pumped about it, but I'm not, and I'd like to talk about why. So before I start going into the negative, I just want to start off by saying it is awesome that we live in a world where there's enough Star Wars movies coming out that I can start nitpicking which ones they're deciding to make. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, that would have been a dream come true that there'd be enough Star Wars movies that I'd be like, a Han Solo movie, Rogue One, more episodes. Like, that would have been a dream come true. We're there. And so I just want to celebrate that, say that's awesome. With that said, because we are in a world where we get all this, we can nitpick it. And so take everything I'm saying with that gigantic grain of salt that I just gave you. Let's talk about it. So when they first announced they were going to do Star Wars spin-off movies, that was great news because the Star Wars universe is so big and expansive, and there's a lot of stories you can tell, a lot of different stories you can tell in this space world of fantasy. And there's many things we'd love to explore about the history of the Jedi, and not just like in a prequel way where we find out what happened a week ago, but in the sense of there's thousands of years that we can cover. And then they started announcing the projects they were working on. And on the surface level, you get really excited because it's things you want to hear about, people you want to know about, and then you go, wait a minute, the universe is so big. And there's some reasons that this is frustrating and why I'm kind of disappointed in the direction they've gone thus far with the spin-off films. See, the first problem with the spin-off movies thus far is they're all essentially telling the same story. They're telling different pieces of the same big story. And you say, well, the spin-off movies aren't a part of the episodes. They're not part of that Skywalker story arc. Yes, but they're all pieces of this story surrounding the rise and fall of a republic and the rise and the fall of an empire and the aftermath of all of that. That's what all of these movies have tied into, and these characters have all tied into that they've been working with thus far. So you've got this big, gigantic, expansive universe covering so much time, and it's all surrounding this one period of time. Now, you have to view the Star Wars universe the way they kind of treat it, which is they treat different planets essentially like different cities or different countries. There's a swamp planet, sand desert planet, cloud planet. So those are kind of like what a city would be like here. And so it very much translates in that regard. And so the events of all these stories, if you were to translate it to Earth, would be essentially kind of like World War I and II. And so that's a way to perceive of the way you're seeing this universe would be World War I and II on our planet. And if every event, every story that the Star Wars universe heard about planet Earth was all about the rise of World War I and then World War II and the aftermath and the events in between, and we didn't hear anything about the other side of the planet, we didn't hear anything about the Reformation, we didn't hear anything about China, we didn't hear anything about the internet, that would be strange. You'd be like, why are we only focused on this war at one point in time? And, you're hearing about, a scoundrel criminal guy that became a World War II general, and you're hearing all these pieces, and they do different things and they're different roles, but it's all essentially about World War I and World War II. Focused all about these European wars that engulf the entire world. That would be strange. And that's essentially what the Star Wars movies do. You've got this gigantic history, and all we're doing is hearing about the governmental structures, their rises and the fall, the characters that played into that all tie together about this government rising and falling, another government rising and falling, and then the aftermath of the power struggle to see who takes over next. That's what all of these do. Rogue One ties into that. Han Solo is a major character in one of these gigantic battles, the uprise and the fall. We're hearing his backstory. Boba Fett, he's the outlier guy, but he's a major player in this story that would be the equivalent of World War II in our times. Like, when you put it that way, we're seeing the same story in just different pieces of a really big picture. Problem number two is that we're seeing the same characters. Now, Rogue One, I think, is probably going to handle this pretty well, that they're taking a main character and making him a side character with Darth Vader, and you've got other minor characters showing up as minor characters again, but the main cast of this are all new characters that we haven't seen before, and I think that's a good way to do that. And of the projects that they're working on, Rogue One is the one I'm most interested in. But still, we have to have Vader in there, and the Death Star really is kind of a main character. It's a main setting of sorts, but it's kind of a character within the Star Wars movies. In this main character of the Death Star, we're getting, again, and we're seeing the origin of the Death Star and the origin of its demise. So that's a problem for me, and it's a much bigger problem when you start going, well, let's do a young Han Solo. We've got this vast universe. We can go all these different places, all these main characters, but they play it safe and go with, let's see more of Han Solo. Let's see Lando again. And so I should be really excited. Lando's a cool character. I want to see more Lando. But I don't want to see more Lando at the expense of seeing all these other things that we could potentially see, and that's what we're getting. Another one of the ideas that have been thrown out there, but the Obi-Wan story, that's another one that's more interesting to me than a Han Solo movie. But at the same time, it's like, oh, what's that guy doing while he's waiting for 20 years? We don't need that story. It doesn't matter at all. And if it actually is kind of important and a big deal, whatever he's doing, that kind of undermines even A New Hope and where we find him. Like where we leave him at the end of one movie and he picks up in the next one, that's undermined if a bunch of really important stuff and he's on a bunch of adventures while secretly just kind of resting on Tatooine. It gets lost in that. Boba Fett, I don't want to hear more about him. I want him to be mysterious. So a movie all about him, I just get afraid they're going to spoil the character. But really, my biggest concern or issue is that I want to see all these other characters. I don't need to just see the same characters that I saw 30 years ago played by another actor hearing just another random story that somehow ties into this bigger story once again. I want to hear new stories with new characters because the universe has them. But really, my biggest issue is the stories they keep telling take place in the same small window of time. So just go back, watch A New Hope, and this is the way Obi-Wan Kenobi describes his universe.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
So he says there's 1,000 generations of Jedi before the Dark Time. So before the prequels, we've got 1,000 years. I use my mic cable as a prop, and so thousands of years are going by. All this time passes, and then we get Phantom Menace. We get 10 years later, we get Attack of the Clones. And then we get this small window of time right here between Attack of the Clones and A New Hope, where you get the Clone Wars movie, Clone Wars TV show, you get Revenge of the Sith. Now we're going to get Han solo film. We might get Boba Fett solo film. We might get Obi-Wan Kenobi solo film. We get the show Rebels. We get Rogue One. And it's all in this small little gap of time. We've got all these thousands of years that we could look at. No. We're going to go to this one little window. See, that window between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope is kind of one of the least interesting points of time in all of this because it's a major thing happened with the fall of the Old Republic, and then a major thing happens with the rebellion, but that middle period of just an empire ruling and the Jedi in hiding, the few Jedi that exist, that's kind of a waiting period. So you can tell a couple stories, maybe a little bit about the formation of the rebellion, but is that really all that interesting? Like the big thing, the big catalyst for a big change in all of this was discovering Luke Skywalker. That's the thing that brings this whole deal down. So there's not a lot of super fascinating stuff in here. And they were going to do a TV show set in that window of time. They wrote dozens and dozens of scripts for it because for some reason they're fascinated by this such a narrow window of time that's kind of one of the least interesting in the world of Star Wars that you could tell. Now you could even take what I said and don't go look backwards, but you can go forwards. Let's go after The Force Awakens. Let's go 100 years in the future. Let's go 200 years in the future. And don't tie it back. It builds off what happened there, and we don't know how it all... But you could do that. You could drive 10 miles, or actually 10,000 light years down the road to a new planet, and what's going on there? You could tell a story from a planet that doesn't take a side in the rebellion, doesn't take a side with the Empire. It's just kind of observing all of this. No. We're seeing the same characters, part of the same story, in the same window of time. So limited, and it seems there's so much more they could do. In closing, the thing to me about this that makes it so strange is that they really are going after A-list talent. They're going after people that have revitalized things, that have directed great sci-fi, that have made massive hits, that have pleased people. So these are people that know how people work, they know how stories work, and they've got a great brain trust developing great ideas. And so on the one hand, I really trust them. I'm not afraid that the Han Solo movie is going to be bad or an embarrassment. It's not going to be the prequels. I'm not afraid of that. It's more of the lost opportunity, because there's all these other good stories we could tell, but we're telling this one instead, and that's a lost opportunity. Or we're going to have to wait 5 years, or we're going to have to wait till the thing starts to die down before we start to get the stories I'm really interested in. But the thing is, they have all this extreme amounts of talent, and what they came up with was essentially the pitches that you could come up with. Like when someone says, oh, they're going to do Star Wars spin-off movies, I wonder if we'll get to see a young Han Solo. I wonder if we'll get a Yoda movie. Like what if we found out what he was doing on Dagobah? Like, that's what you would come up with. That's what I would come up with just sitting here. Like, I could take a card and just write down a bunch of ideas for what you could do for a Star Wars movie. And they're so basic. It's like literally just take someone that you already know and move to a different time period. Move an event you already know and step back one day or 1 month with the Death Star plans. That's easy. Like, anybody can do that. You can do that. We could make a hat right now. We could write a list of characters and then adjectives, and we could just do Star Wars Mad Lib or something like that and create the premise for these movies, essentially. And that's curious to me because they're really smart people working on these movies that have incredible talent that they could come up with all these stories across all the universe, and instead they come up with young Han Solo. Obi-Wan on Tatooine. There we go. We got it. Boba Fett. What else did he do? Like, that's so basic, as if maybe the marketing department was determining who gets to do these or which stories we're going to tell. That's what this feels like to me. The marketing department, a studio head that's all about money, and he doesn't know anything about Star Wars. And so you can walk into the room, and if you can sell him on it in 2 sentences, young Han Solo meets Chewbacca and Lando. Boom! I understand that. Let's make a movie. It's Knights of the Old Republic. It's 1,000 years before the Phantom Menace, and it's before the Sith, and so there's these other things on this other... Whoa, what are the Knights of the Old Republic? How does this work? What's the time period? What are the sky... I don't get it. Like, that's what this feels like. The businessman, the marketing people are like, I don't get it, so let's not make that one. Let's make the easy one. That's a problem to me. But as I said at the beginning, it's so exciting to me that I can actually nitpick this, that I can complain about the Star Wars movies as opposed to wish that we were getting Star Wars movies. This is a great time to be alive. I just want to talk about this, invent somewhere about something I'm actually very excited about. I will be the first person in line. I'm going to get my tickets in advance. Super excited about all of these. Love that we live in this world. But I wish we were getting some things besides what we are getting. So what do you think? Tell me in the comment section, what type of stories would you like them to do in the Star Wars standalone movies? Tell me in the comment section, because I don't want to just talk about Star Wars. I want to talk about Star Wars with you. So let's have a great discussion down there. If you're new to my channel, you've never clicked that subscribe button, I would love it if you join us in the conversation. So please consider clicking the subscribe button. Thank you for watching.